I booked a weekend Airbnb in a quiet residential neighborhood just outside a small town in upstate New York. It was the kind of area where people still wave at you from their front porches, and yards are decorated with wind chimes and solar-powered garden lights. I wanted peace and a break from the city, just a couple of nights to reset. The listing looked cozy. A small 2-bedroom home, tastefully decorated, with good lighting and a little backyard. The reviews were all positive. The host, Kevin, had over 55-star ratings. People said he was friendly, responsive, professional. When I pulled up that Friday afternoon, the house looked just like the photos. Clean beige siding, white trim, small porch with 2 wooden chairs. Kevin greeted me at the door with a firm handshake and a relaxed smile. Mid-40s, average build, salt and pepper beard. Dressed like someone who did light carpentry work. Jeans, boots, a soft flannel. He handed me the keys, showed me around the house. Everything was in order. Kitchen stocked with basic cooking supplies, fresh towels folded neatly in the bathroom, clean sheets, a little handwritten welcome note on the counter with the Wi-Fi password. It was all very normal, very average. Kevin left after the short tour, waved goodbye, and walked back to a silver Subaru parked at the curb. Seemed like a nice guy, the kind of person you'd forget in a day or two. I had no reason to think anything was off. I spent the rest of the afternoon settling in, took a short nap, then started watching a show on my laptop while making dinner. Around 9:30 that night, I realized I wanted a drink and maybe a snack for later. I remembered seeing a small corner store a couple blocks away when I drove in. It was a chilly night, early spring, with that mix of damp air and leftover snow in the shadows. I threw on a hoodie and walked down the street, my breath showing in little puffs as I went. The corner store was about what you'd expect. Fluorescent lights, wire shelves, a clerk who barely looked up. I bought a 6-pack, some chips, a pack of gum, and walked back the same way I came. It wasn't more than a 15-minute round trip. As I turned onto the street where the Airbnb was, I slowed down. The porch light was still on, just like I'd left it, but something inside the house made me pause. Through the living room window, behind the sheer curtain, I could see someone sitting on the couch. At first, I assumed it was a reflection, maybe from a passing car or even a shadow cast from one of those porch lights. But I stopped on the sidewalk and stared a little longer. No movement, just a man sitting perfectly still. Then I saw the face. The porch light hit just right and I could make out the features. It was Kevin. Same beard, same shirt, I think. Just sitting there in the dark. No lights on in the room. No phone in his hand. Not watching TV. Just sitting, looking straight ahead. I stood there for a good 30 seconds. Then I took a step toward the house. The figure didn't move. I pulled out my phone and called the number listed on the Airbnb app. No answer. I let it ring through, then tried again. Still nothing. I texted, waited a minute. Nothing. At this point, I wasn't scared, exactly. More confused. It didn't make sense. Maybe he left something behind, came back to grab it, sat down for a minute? But why wouldn't he answer the phone? And why would he be sitting there in the dark? I walked up the steps slowly, holding my keys. I knocked once. Nothing. Knocked again, louder. No response. I finally put the key in the lock, opened the door, and stepped inside. Empty. The living room was quiet, just like I'd left it. Couch cushions in the same place. Throw blanket still folded. Nothing looked touched. No shoes by the door. No jacket hanging on the hook. I checked the kitchen. Checked both bedrooms. The bathroom. Even the small laundry closet. Nothing. Nobody. I stood in the middle of the living room for a while, trying to figure out if maybe I'd imagined it. I turned on all the lights, looked behind the couch, opened every cabinet door. I don't know what I was expecting, but I checked anyway. Eventually, I locked the door, checked the windows, and went to bed. I told myself it was just a weird shadow, or maybe a neighbor passing by had looked in and resembled Kevin. Maybe it was all in my head. I tried to sleep. Sometime after dawn, I rolled over and grabbed my phone. The lock screen was filled with a notification from Airbnb. Your reservation has been canceled by the host. I opened the app and stared. The cancellation time was listed as 9:52 p.m., The exact time I was walking back from the store. The exact time I saw someone in the window. I sat up in bed, the sheets tangled around me, and read it again. The booking was listed as canceled by Kevin. No reason given. The message simply said, "Host canceled reservation. Full refund issued." My stomach turned. I hadn't received a refund yet. I still had the keys. I was still inside the house. But officially, I wasn't a guest there anymore. I checked my email. Same message. I checked my bank app. No refund posted. I opened Airbnb again and tried to message Kevin. His profile was still there, but the contact button was grayed out. I tried calling the number again. It went straight to voicemail. I decided to get up and get dressed. I packed my bag, stuffed everything back into my backpack, then went through the house again. Still empty. I took a video as I walked through, just in case anything came up later. I filmed the living room, the kitchen, the 2 bedrooms, the hallway. Then I locked the door behind me and got in my car. I didn't leave the town right away. I drove to a diner near the highway and ordered coffee and eggs. I sat in a booth with the blinds cracked just enough to let in the sunlight. I kept checking the Airbnb app, looking for updates. The listing was still live. Kevin's profile was still active, but it was like the whole thing had hit a wall. No responses, no updates, no changes. I called Airbnb support and waited on hold for 20 minutes. When I finally got through, I explained what happened. They said the host had indeed canceled the reservation. I asked why, and they said he didn't give a reason. I asked if they could contact him. They said they'd try and that someone would follow up with me. I told them everything, the guy in the window, the cancellation time, the silent house. They didn't say much, just promised to escalate the case. I got back on the road that afternoon and drove home. The whole way back, I kept thinking about that moment on the sidewalk, about how clearly I'd seen him through the curtain. It wasn't a trick of the light. It wasn't a stranger. It was Kevin. Over the next few days, I checked the app regularly. My refund came through 3 days later. Still no message from Kevin. Still no explanation. Eventually, the listing disappeared. Not deactivated, gone. Like it had never existed. When I searched the address, it came up as a private residence. No listings, no reviews, nothing. About a week later, I went a little deeper. I started searching online for property records, just to see what I could find. The address was registered under a holding company. No individual name attached. I ran the company through a business database. It had dozens of properties under its name, all in different towns. A few Airbnbs, a few long-term rentals. I tried searching Kevin, along with the name of the company. Nothing. I reverse image searched the listing photos. One of them popped up on a real estate site from 2 years earlier. The same couch, same kitchen. But in that listing, the property was listed as sold as is. It had sat vacant for months before the sale. The buyer? That same holding company. That was the last clear trail. Everything else was a dead end. No other reviews mentioning anything odd. No forum posts. No social media chatter. Just a quiet house in a small town. A canceled booking, and a man who may or may not have ever left. I still don't know who I saw that night, or why the reservation was canceled, or what, if anything, I interrupted. But something about it never sat right with me. Sometimes, late at night, I still picture him sitting there in the dark. Same blank stare, same stillness, and I keep wondering, if I hadn't come back when I did, would anything have been different? Or was I always meant to see him, just once, just long enough to make me leave? I had booked the Airbnb as part of a last-minute solo trip. I wasn't sure where I was going, just that I needed to get away for a bit. It wasn't far from home, just a few hours in the middle of nowhere. The place looked charming enough in the pictures, an old house tucked away on the edge of a sleepy little town. The host's profile said she was a quiet, private person, but her reviews were good. People said she was attentive and kind, if not a little quirky. The drive up was uneventful, just miles and miles of country roads, passing only the occasional farm and a few dilapidated buildings. The sun was starting to dip low as I pulled into the long gravel driveway. The house was older, but it had a welcoming feel to it, with ivy crawling up the side and an old porch swing creaking in the breeze. It wasn't exactly beautiful, but it had character. I parked my car and grabbed my bag, walking up the front steps. The door was unlocked when I tried it, and I stepped inside, greeted by the scent of wood and old furniture. The living room had a large, overstuffed couch, and on the walls were paintings of landscapes and family photos. Nothing seemed unusual at first glance, just a typical old house in the countryside. The host wasn't there to greet me in person, which was fine. I didn't need much attention. On the small table by the door, there was a handwritten note that read, "Welcome to my home. I hope you enjoy your stay. Just a few simple house rules. 1. No candles or open flames. 2. No visitors, please. 3. Do not open the basement door. If you need anything, feel free to call or text. Enjoy your time here." The rules seemed a little odd, but I shrugged it off. The no candles thing? Probably just some safety concern. No visitors? I wasn't planning on having any. And the basement door? I thought it was probably just an old, creaky space that the owner didn't want guests messing around in. I laughed a little at the "don't open the basement door" part, imagining some kind of joke. Maybe she was just trying to create a bit of mystery, a bit of fun. I'd never been one to take things like that too seriously. The house was peaceful, though. Felt like time slowed down once I was inside. I decided to unwind after my drive by getting cozy on the couch with some snacks and a book. The light from the window slowly faded into the evening, and soon it was dark outside. Around 10:30, I decided to head to bed. The bed in the guest room was large, with an old quilt spread over it, and the window looked out over a dark, still yard. I pulled the covers up, trying to ignore the unease creeping up my spine. It was an old house. Old houses creaked and groaned, I told myself. I was being silly. Around 11 p.m., I heard a faint thud coming from below. It was soft at first, almost like something heavy had been set down on the floor. I frowned, trying to tell myself it was just the house settling. Maybe a door that hadn't quite latched properly. I waited a few minutes, but it came again, thud, thud, thud. My heart skipped a beat. What was that? It was almost like rhythmic knocking, but not exactly. I got up and walked to the bedroom door, opening it quietly. The hall was dark, and I couldn't see anything clearly. I stood there for a moment, straining my ears. The sound came again, this time louder. It was definitely coming from below, from the direction of the basement. I hesitated. Was the house just that old? Was it the pipes? Or was there someone in the basement? I remembered the note. Don't open the basement door. I stood frozen for a moment before walking down the stairs, toward the kitchen. The basement door was in the corner of the room, a plain wooden door with a brass handle. It wasn't locked. In fact, the door was slightly ajar, just a crack, almost like it had been pushed open by someone. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. My breath quickened, and for a moment, I almost turned back. But I was curious, and I wasn't about to let some weird, unexplained noise get the best of me. I walked over to the door and, before I could stop myself, I pushed it shut, hard. It clicked, and I stood there for a second, listening to the silence that followed. The noise stopped, too. I told myself it was probably nothing, just an old house making noises. I locked the door, felt like the right thing to do. But then, around 3 a.m., my phone alarm went off. It startled me, and I shot up in bed, wide awake. The screen of my phone glowed in the dark, and my heart raced when I saw what it said. It wasn't a notification. It wasn't a reminder I'd set myself. It was an actual calendar reminder, a weird one. Feed them. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. Feed them? What the hell did that mean? I hadn't set any reminders, especially not one with that message. I got out of bed and went to the kitchen, trying to shake off the feeling of dread settling in my stomach.
My mean spoon.
Was this part of the Airbnb? A joke? Was the host trying to mess with me? But the more I thought about it, the more the unease built up. I felt an overwhelming urge to check the basement door again. though part of me was telling me not to. I didn't want to get involved with whatever was down there, even though my curiosity was gnawing at me. I grabbed my phone, my fingers shaking, and dialed the host's number. It rang a few times before going to voicemail. I hung up without leaving a message. Then I stood there in the dark kitchen, listening. Nothing, not a sound from downstairs. The only thing I could hear was my own breathing, slow and deliberate as I fought to calm myself. I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had to go down there. I had to see what was going on. I walked toward the basement door again, every step feeling heavier. I had to know. I couldn't let myself be scared anymore. I reached for the handle and turned it, the door creaking open. The air in the basement felt cold, a strange chill that sent a shiver down my spine. I turned on the light and descended the stairs slowly, each step creaking under my weight. The basement was musty, with old wooden beams stretching overhead and a few boxes stacked in the corners. But that wasn't what caught my attention. It was the smell. Faint, but it was there, like something rotting. I held my breath, the feeling of dread growing heavier by the second. Something was wrong. I glanced around the basement. There was a corner of the room I hadn't noticed before, just behind a large, broken chair. And there, just beyond the dim light from above, I could see something moving. I gasped, stumbling back in shock. There was a man, or something resembling one, sitting in the shadows. His skin was pale, almost sickly looking. His eyes were wide, feverish, and around him, there were small, skittering creatures, rats, maybe? I wasn't sure, but I could see them moving quickly around his legs, almost crawling on him. I froze, too horrified to move. He looked up at me, and for a second, I thought he was going to speak, but instead, he just stared. His eyes were wild, almost desperate, and he was breathing heavily, almost like he was gasping for air. The rats, or whatever they were, seemed to be swarming around him, and I couldn't take it anymore. I backed away slowly, my heart racing. The door behind me slammed shut, and I almost jumped out of my skin. The man, if that's what he was, didn't move. He just stared at me as I turned and ran back up the stairs. I slammed the basement door shut again, this time more forcefully than before. I locked it, making sure it was secure. I ran to the kitchen, grabbed my phone, and called 911. They said someone would be there in 10 minutes. I waited, not daring to look back toward the basement. When the police arrived, they found the man. He was taken into custody and later identified as a person who had been living in the basement for months, somehow slipping under the radar of the host, who claimed she had no idea he was there. It turned out that the calendar reminder was no joke. The feed them message was his way of signaling that he needed food, or worse, that the rats were hungry. I never stayed in another Airbnb again, and every time I hear a faint knock or a thud, I remember the basement and the man who had been waiting for me. The Airbnb was in a quiet, older neighborhood, about 20 minutes outside the city. I had booked it last minute for a work trip. All the hotels were full for some conference, and I needed something cheap but not shady. This place seemed fine, quaint even. The pictures showed a little yellow house with white trim and ivy growing around the porch posts. Inside, it had a rustic kind of charm. Wood floors, mismatched furniture, and a big antique rug in the living room that looked like it had stories of its own. Check-in was self-serve, just a lockbox by the door. The sun was already down when I got there. A porch light glowed warmly, and cicadas buzzed in the distance. Felt like a safe area. I let myself in, dropped my bag by the couch, and walked around a bit to get the layout. Living room, small kitchen off to the side, a hallway that led to a bathroom and a single bedroom. Simple setup. Nothing out of the ordinary. The air smelled a little like old wood and something faintly sweet, maybe some kind of cleaner. I was too tired to care much. I had been driving for hours. All I really wanted was to shower, eat something, and sleep. On the coffee table in the living room was a leather-bound guest book. Caught my eye because you don't see those much anymore. It looked well used, the leather soft and dark from years of handling. I flipped through it after setting down my water. Most people just left quick notes. Had a lovely stay. Thanks for the cozy house. Perfect for our weekend getaway. Then I noticed something odd. Near the back, where the pages got fewer and the notes thinned out, someone had scrawled a message in messy handwriting that didn't match the rest. Do not sleep in the bedroom. Just like that. All caps. No explanation. No smiley face to hint it was a joke. It stood out. I stared at it for a second, kind of half laughing to myself. Probably just someone messing around. People leave weird notes in guest books all the time, but it still made me feel a little weird. I turned a couple more pages. Nothing else like it. I wrote my own note on one of the blank pages. Something basic, like, thanks for the stay. Quiet and comfortable. I signed it with my name and the date, then closed the book and forgot about it. After a shower and some microwave mac and cheese I'd picked up at a gas station, I went to bed. The bedroom was small and dark, with a low ceiling and a big wooden dresser against one wall. The bed was pushed into the corner. I remember thinking it was colder in there than the rest of the house. Not freezing, but noticeably different. I didn't bother unpacking, just set my phone on the nightstand and crawled under the covers. I think it was a little past midnight when I woke up. I didn't know why at first. My eyes just opened. It was pitch black in the room. No light from the hallway. No cars outside. Nothing. I lay still for a second, trying to remember where I was. Then I heard it. Crying. It was soft, uneven. At first I thought maybe it was outside. Someone on the street or next door. But it wasn't muffled like that. It sounded close. Too close. It was coming from the corner of the room. My eyes adjusted slowly, and I looked toward the sound. There was a shape by the dresser. Person. Crouched down. I couldn't see their face, but I could make out shoulders, the curve of a back. They weren't moving, just kind of hunched there. The crying stopped the second I focused on it. I turned on the lamp beside the bed. There was nothing there. The corner was empty. Dresser, carpet, walls. Nothing that could have been mistaken for a person. No piles of clothes, no furniture except for the dresser. I got up, checked the window. Locked. No footprints, no marks. I opened the bedroom door and looked down the hall. Quiet. Still. I didn't sleep much after that. Just lay there, the light on, watching the corner. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd see that shape again. I kept trying to convince myself I was dreaming or imagining things. Maybe I was half asleep when I saw it. Maybe my brain filled in gaps. When morning finally came, I got up, showered again just to shake the unease off, and started packing. I wasn't going to stay another night. Work or not, I didn't want to be in that house again. Before I left, I remembered the guest book. It was still sitting on the coffee table where I left it. I flipped to the page where I wrote my note. It was gone. My name, the date, the thank you note gone. Not erased, not ripped out. Just not there. The page was blank. I flipped through the pages again, back to where I'd seen that warning. It wasn't there either. The messy writing. Do not sleep in the bedroom. It was gone. Every page looked normal again, full of short, happy notes from strangers. No warnings, no scribbles, no sign that anyone had written anything weird at all. I stood there for a while, flipping back and forth, trying to figure it out. Maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe I didn't sign the book at all. Maybe the warning was on a loose piece of paper and someone threw it out. But I knew I hadn't imagined it. I left the book open on the coffee table and walked out without looking back. Later that day, I booked a different place across town. A hotel. Expensive, but worth it. I tried to focus on work, but my brain kept drifting back to that corner of the room. That shape. The missing message. I thought about messaging the host to ask if anyone else had mentioned anything weird. But what would I say? Hey, I saw something in your guest book that disappeared overnight. Also, I might have seen a person in your bedroom who wasn't there. I didn't want to sound crazy, so I didn't say anything. But the memory stuck with me. A few weeks later, curiosity got the better of me. I looked up the listing again, thinking maybe I'd see a bad review or someone mentioning the same thing. But the listing was gone. Removed. Just a broken link and a message saying, "This listing is no longer available." I've stayed in a lot of places since then. Hotels, rentals, friends' houses. But I've never touched another guest book. And if I ever see a handwritten warning like that again, I won't ignore it, even if it disappears by morning. The reviews were glowing, all of them. I could hardly believe my eyes when I read through the comments on the listing. People described the place as pristine, welcoming, perfectly maintained, and most importantly, the host was incredibly accommodating. Not once did anyone mention the host's name, though. Odd, but I figured it was just one of those quirky things people didn't bother to mention. I mean, not every Airbnb listing is about the host. The place looked amazing from the pictures, and it seemed to be the perfect getaway. So I booked it. I drove up to the house late in the afternoon, tired from a long day of work and eager for a quiet weekend away from the city. The house sat on a quiet, tree-lined street just outside of town. The exterior was clean, almost too clean, with a fresh coat of paint on the porch railing and neatly trimmed hedges. It felt almost like it was waiting for me. I stepped inside, and the first thing I noticed was how impeccably clean everything was. There wasn't a single speck of dust. It wasn't just tidy, it was sterile in a way. The floors gleamed under the soft light, and every piece of furniture was arranged just so, as if it had been staged for a photo shoot. There were no personal touches anywhere. No family photos, no knickknacks, not even a plant. It looked like a hotel room, but even that had more character. This place was unervingly perfect. I set my bags down and wandered through the house. The kitchen was spotless, the countertops gleaming like they'd never been used. The living room had a large sectional couch, but there were no throw pillows or blankets to make it feel cozy. The walls were decorated with abstract art, nothing too offensive, but also nothing that made me feel like it had been chosen with any sense of personal taste. The bathroom was perhaps the strangest part. It was so pristine, it almost looked like it was in a showroom. The shower had no soap, no shampoo, no bath mat. The towels were folded into perfect rectangles, stacked neatly on a shelf. I felt an odd sense of unease in there, like everything was just too perfect, too impersonal. I shrugged it off. Maybe it was just the host style. Some people liked everything to be perfectly neat, almost too neat. I wasn't going to let it ruin my weekend. I decided to relax and unpack, taking my time as the sun began to set. The house had a comfortable warmth to it, the kind you'd expect from a well-kept place. But as I settled in for the night, something didn't sit right. The silence was too heavy. No sounds of traffic from the street outside, no hum of a refrigerator in the kitchen, just a stillness that felt unnatural. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was just my imagination. But then the whispers started. It was just before midnight. I had just turned off the lights and crawled into bed, pulling the covers up to my chin. The bed was surprisingly comfortable, but that didn't help me shake the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. It felt like I was being watched, though I couldn't explain why. At first, I thought I was hearing things. Maybe the wind outside, or a car driving by. But then I heard it again, a faint whisper. It came from the direction of the closet, soft but distinct. "Come closer." I froze, my heart racing. I knew I hadn't imagined it. My instincts screamed at me to get up, to leave, but I stayed perfectly still. The voice didn't come again, but the sense of dread didn't let go. I was paralyzed in bed, unable to move, as if some unseen force was holding me down. After what felt like an eternity, I finally mustered the courage to get up and check the closet. There was nothing in there. The door was wide open, and the only thing inside was a few spare blankets and a set of extra towels. Nothing out of the ordinary, just like the rest of the house. But the feeling lingered, that gnawing unease. I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, I decided to push through it. I told myself it was just nerves, that I was overreacting. But when I went to grab my bags to unpack, I noticed something odd under the bed. A journal. I bent down to pick it up, curiosity getting the better of me. The cover was plain, nothing written on it, but when I opened it, I realized it was filled with handwritten entries. At first, I thought it might be a guest book of some kind, a place for previous visitors to leave their thoughts about the house. But as I flipped through the pages, I noticed something strange. The entries were full of descriptions of odd dreams, unsettling experiences, and a sense of being watched. Some were brief, others more detailed. The strangest part was that none of the entries lined up with the glowing reviews the house had received. One person had written about hearing footsteps outside their door at night. Another mentioned feeling cold spots in certain rooms, despite the heat being on. One entry was particularly chilling. I had a dream last night that someone was standing in my room, just watching me. I woke up, and I swear I saw a shadow move across the wall. Don't stay past the third night. I shuddered. The last entry was particularly disturbing, with the person writing, "Something isn't right here. I don't know what it is, but I don't feel safe. I'm leaving early." I quickly closed the journal, my heart pounding. I was starting to feel like I had made a mistake. Maybe it was just my imagination, but everything about this place felt off. It was too perfect, too staged. The reviews were glowing, yes, but now I wondered if they were too good to be true. Why did so many people praise the host without ever mentioning their name? It made no sense. That night, I tried to shake off the unease and relax, telling myself it was all in my head. But as I lay in bed, the whispers returned. They weren't as loud as before, but this time they were clearer. I heard my name. "Come here." I bolted upright in bed, my heart racing. My mind was spinning, my thoughts jumbled. The closet door was slightly ajar, but I couldn't bring myself to check it again. I felt paralyzed, unable to move, as if something was holding me down. I glanced at the clock. It was 2 a.m. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my things in a panic, my hands shaking as I hurriedly packed my bag. I didn't care about checking out. I just needed to leave. The house felt suffocating, and the air was thick with something unspoken. I walked quickly to the front door, my nerves frayed. The door was locked. I fumbled with the keys, the sound of my breath harsh in the quiet house. When I finally opened the door, I stepped out into the cool night air, gasping for breath. I left the house, not looking back. I didn't stop until I reached my car, the headlights casting a faint glow over the driveway. I didn't care where I went. I just needed to get as far away from that place as possible. As I pulled away from the house, I received a message from the host. "Hi, I noticed you left early. Is everything okay? Please let us know if there's anything we can do to improve your experience. We'll be sure to update your review." I stared at the message, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The words "will be sure to update your review" hung in my mind, sending a chill down my spine. It was as if the host knew exactly what had happened, as if they were watching me leave, waiting for me to go so they could edit the reviews to change the narrative. The entire experience felt manipulated, staged, and controlled. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had narrowly escaped something much worse than an awkward stay in an Airbnb. The reviews weren't real. The house wasn't perfect. It was a trap, and I had been the prey. And I wasn't going back. Not for all the glowing reviews in the world. I booked the Airbnb because I needed a break. Things had been rough for a while. Work was wearing me down. My apartment building in Portland was being renovated nonstop, and I hadn't slept more than 4 hours a night in weeks. I just wanted some quiet, some space, somewhere to be alone, clear my head, maybe hike a bit. So I started looking around for something cheap and out of the way. That's when I found this place in rural Oregon. The listing described it as a guest house behind a larger property. It looked cozy, a single-bedroom cabin-style setup, wood walls, clean little kitchen, soft lighting, and a fire pit out back. The bigger house in front, the main house, was marked as unoccupied. It was cheaper than anything else I could find and had good reviews. People mostly talked about how quiet it was and how peaceful the woods felt. I figured it was perfect, so I booked it for 5 nights. The drive out there took longer than I expected. My phone lost signal about 40 minutes before I arrived, and the last few turns weren't marked by any clear road signs, just gravel offshoots with rusted-out mailboxes. But I found it eventually, A long dirt driveway led past rows of fir trees to the main house, which sat slightly crooked on its lot. It was large, with peeling gray paint and a wide, sagging porch. Some of the shutters were missing, and the roof looked like it had taken a beating from years of storms. The guest house sat behind it, separated by a gravel turnaround and a few old pine stumps. It was smaller than I imagined, but not in a bad way. Just enough space for what I needed. There was a key box on the back door. I punched in the code the host had sent me, got the key, and stepped inside. It smelled like old wood and lemon cleaner. There was a small couch, a kitchenette, and a short hallway that led to a bedroom and bathroom. All of it was clean, a little rustic, but welcoming. It felt like a place that hadn't seen many people in a while. That first night, I cooked some eggs and toast and sat on the little porch out back. The sun was low, and the forest behind the property was glowing in that golden, late-day light. It was the quietest I had felt in years. No car horns, no neighbors yelling through thin apartment walls. Just the wind and the birds. I went to bed early, around 9 p.m. I hadn't realized how exhausted I was until I lay down. It hit me like a wave. I passed out almost immediately. At some point in the night, I woke up. No reason. Just one of those sudden wake-ups where your brain kicks on out of nowhere. The room was dark. No streetlights out here, just the sliver of moonlight through the blinds. I lay still, trying to fall back asleep. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Not inside my cabin, they were above me. Slow, steady steps. Creaking floorboards. The guest house was single-story, so there was no upstairs. But the steps were clear, like someone walking just above my head. I sat up in bed, holding my breath. The footsteps kept going, a steady pattern. I told myself maybe it was some kind of animal. A raccoon on the roof. A tree branch shifting in the wind. But it didn't sound like that. It sounded like a person. Eventually, it stopped. I didn't sleep much after that. The next day, I went for a hike. There was a trailhead about a mile down the road, and it led through a wide loop of forest and rocky clearings. It was beautiful. The air was cold and damp, and my shoes got wet, but I didn't care. I needed the distraction. I tried to forget about the night before. By the time I got back to the guest house, I had almost convinced myself it was just my imagination. That night, it happened again. It was around 2 a.m. when I woke up. Same thing. No noise inside the room, but I could hear the same pacing overhead. Not fast, not aggressive. Just steady, like someone walking in circles. I turned on the lamp and sat in the corner chair, staring at the ceiling. The noise didn't stop for a while. I texted the Airbnb host in the morning and asked if anyone was using the main house. They didn't reply right away. The third day was cloudy. I spent most of it inside, writing, reading, and pacing. I couldn't shake the feeling something was off. Around 4 p.m., I finally got curious. I walked over to the main house. The front door had a heavy padlock on it. Thick rusted metal, definitely not something easy to open. The windows were dusty, and most had old blinds drawn shut behind them. But one window to the left of the porch was cracked open at the bottom, maybe an inch or two. Enough to get a grip on it. I looked around. Nothing but trees and sky. I slid the window up further. It moved easier than I expected. The wood frame was rough but still working. I pulled myself up and over, dropping quietly into the room beyond. It smelled like dust and would rot. The floor creaked under my feet. It was mostly empty inside. Some old furniture pushed against the walls, a table missing a leg, a pile of yellowed newspapers in one corner. Cobwebs clung to the ceiling beams. It looked like no one had lived here in years. But one thing stood out. Down the hallway, there was a door at the end. It was locked with a sliding bolt from the outside. And on the wood floor in front of it were drag marks. Deep scuffs, like something heavy had been pulled across the floor. Fresh too. No dust had settled in the grooves. They led right up to the locked door. I didn't open it. I thought about it. I stared at it for a long time, hand resting on the bolt. But something in my gut told me not to. My chest felt tight, like my body already knew something I didn't. I left the house through the window, slid it back down, and walked back to the guest house. That night, I barely slept. I kept the lights on, At around 3:30 a.m., the footsteps returned. Only this time they didn't stop. They got louder, more forceful, and then 3 heavy knocks, directly above my bed. Not the ceiling in general, not the far side of the room. Right above where my head had been an hour earlier. I got up. My hands were shaking. I opened the door, walked out into the cold, and looked at the main house. The window I had climbed through earlier, it was boarded shut, thick plywood bolted from the inside. I could see the new screw heads and the fresh wood grain. Someone had done it after I left, and I hadn't heard a thing. I went back inside, locked every door and window, and sat on the couch with a kitchen knife. I didn't sleep. I didn't even close my eyes. When the sun came up, I packed everything, tossed it in my car. I didn't even stop to double-check anything. I just drove. I found a gas station with a weak signal and called the AIRBNB support line. Told them something was wrong. They said they'd reach out to the host. I never heard back. A few weeks later, I checked the listing. It was gone. Not marked as unavailable. Gone. I don't know who or what was inside that house. Maybe someone squatting. Maybe someone the host didn't know about. Or maybe someone they did. But I know what I heard. And I know that door had been opened recently. Someone was in there. Whatever was above me that night wasn't just footsteps or wind. It was real. It was deliberate. And it knew exactly where I was sleeping.